Everybody, welcome back to our Zoom calls. As you know, we've done probably 14 or 15 of these in the last year as a result of COVID and all the madness. But something in the bio that we sent you attracted you today to apply some of this knowledge that you'll learn to your business or inventions. And today really is a great opportunity for all of us, even me, the guy that can't create. I'm all thumbs. I just have to be very linear. It's a great opportunity for us to be around. As they say, you are the average of the 5 people who you hang around the most. And today we are going to get the privilege and opportunity to hang out with 2 individuals who are just quite frankly smarter than all of us combined. They are both graduates of MIT, both engineers, inventors, and journeymen that have for a long time been on the front lines of innovation and creation. But most of all, I think we should be grateful for the patriotism in which they are showing and their willingness to donate their precious time to our group here today, share some of their knowledge, processes, how to attack problems and come up with kind of reasonable solutions and share their experience. This is stuff that, again, they went to MIT. This is invaluable stuff that we have access to right now. So I want to welcome Mr. John Masucci and Mr. John Fortunato. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for being here.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all for what a warm reception. Thank you for all the compliments. I'm pretty confident that most of the folks in this room are smarter than me. So, but thank you for the compliments anyway. So here we are. John and I have worked together for many years. We're both engineers. How did I end up here? Sometimes, some nights I'm an insomniac and, maybe too much going on up here. And I listened to the radio and I was listening to Hugh Hewitt and he spoke so highly about this program. And so I have a pretty decent equipped shop. I've got some lathes and milling machines and all kinds of welding equipment, shapers, power hammers to do metal shaping. And I run a summer program, here in the Northeast, I'm only like an hour outside of New York City. Nobody has shop classes anymore. Like none of the schools, none of the high schools have woodworking. And, we all come from that Yankee ingenuity, right? All that talent with our hands. And, so I offered through some local organizations and school organizations, hey, send me some talented kids. And that's been a really, turned out to be, some of these young fellas come from, they come from poorer areas of New York City, and they were exposed to a file in their hand and some tin snips and some welding, and all of a sudden they're excited to go to a vocational school or go off even to engineering school, and it sort of changed my life. So that's sort of like maybe a little bit of the backdrop. And then I was listening to Hugh Hewitt, and with the COVID, it's been hard. It's been difficult to get students. And I said, hey, maybe this is an opportunity for me to offer maybe more than just my shop, but also, John and I have a background in not only fabrication, extensive, fabrication, but a lifetime almost of designing complex machines and aerospace machinery. And then also, a lot of the sort of analysis, which is, some of the higher end stuff, or, some of the more difficult stuff like calculus and all this, analysis of vibration. And I bring that up only, maybe we could offer, maybe there's some folks out there that have stuff that's not working or failing, and maybe we could help analyze that stuff. So that was sort of the overall step into, how we sort of end up here. I have a small engineering company, Innovatori. Maybe many of you have seen my website. Casey, let me know if I should pull it up or not. I hope I'm doing okay. And maybe later on, we've got a full hour and a half. I could go, show some pictures of my work. I've worked in aerospace. I've done a lot of design work for Sikorsky. I've done a lot of, medical instrumentation design for outfits or hospitals like Sloan Kettering, which I'll probably get to some interesting videos. And I wrote some notes here to myself. Also, project leadership. I run teams. There's probably folks in this call that have ran much larger teams. But I've run, sort of engineering projects. Currently, I've got, for a rather significant client, like 25 engineers. And so I've got some experience in like sort of what it takes to get things done on a group level and constantly learning in that space. And also I've got a lot of patents, and Casey and Colonel Meyer mentioned that some of my experience getting the patents may also be helpful. So I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Coney Island, took the subways to high school in the early 80s when the city was a mess. I don't know what shape it's in now, but so that's sort of I have a great uncle that's buried in Arlington National Cemetery, and come from a family of quite patriotic folks. And maybe I'll just end there.
Well, yeah, no, John, that's great. Thank you for the background. That was great. I think, Mr. John F. I want to go through your whole last name, but with the Italian last names, there's so many syllables, and I'm just.
That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, why don't you give us
John F.
a brief
works.
on your background?
My background is similar to John's, right? So I'm not as eloquent as him, so I'll probably be concise and to the point, right? I've had a lifetime career in design and analysis for automated systems and relatively complex systems, as well as some simple stuff as well. Analysis and team leading as well, to not to the same extent as John, but I think it just boils down to like a willingness to share my experience and to help out others that might be interested in a similar path forward.
Fantastic. This is this type of education to me is so valuable. And just to give everyone an idea, we have people on the call that everybody from woodworkers, leather workers, metal workers. We have people who are inventors that aren't tangibly working with metal or a ton of, I guess, mathematics yet. They're kind of at the beginning stages of ideas. And so there's a lot of things that we can talk about today. Mm-hmm. And I think when myself and John Masucci talked a few days ago, we talked a little bit about the process of identifying and solving a problem. And what does that look like from a mind like yours, and where you sit and you see a problem that a hospital might have. And I know, John, you had mentioned something you invented for a hospital to help with a cancer treatment. Kind of walk us through what it looks like when you hear of identify a problem and how to solve it. And I ask that question from the perspective of not just you, but maybe when we see some of our veterans that aren't going to solve a problem at a hospital for a cancer treatment, but to solve a problem in a marketplace, like how to hang a picture or something like that. So just kind of walk through your mindset, your training, your experience on how you identify problems, where you go in stages to try and solve
them. So that's a really good question. And at some point, Casey, maybe we'll jump to some of the presentation stuff that I showed you. But for now, maybe you just want me to kind of like just ad lib it. And I think that's probably a pretty good way to start.
Perfect.
I would say, first of all, there's many paths to the sea. There's no one way. There's some good tried and true characteristics, right? Always respect tradition. What's worked in the past typically would work. So, as I'm talking, I'm realizing if you want to solve a problem and it's really similar, you might seek out the help of people that have already solved that problem, right? Like, so sometimes it's, don't spend a lot of time reinventing the wheel if someone's already suffered a great deal and done that. And it's kind of funny, but as I was preparing for this call, one of the things Casey had mentioned and Colonel Meyer, hey, we're going to walk through the process of, design and solving problems. And I wrote a bunch of stuff down, but this thing about actually finding the folks that may have already solved that particular problem, I actually didn't write down. And I'm glad that I brought it up because John Fortunato and I encounter many times folks who like, oh yeah, I came up with this idea, I own it, I've got to make it work. And they spend a lot of time making their idea work when, it's sort of being open about how, almost like a musician who wants to develop his or her own style. They listen to all types of musicians that have all different styles. And then eventually they kind of have their own. Okay, so that's one aspect. The other thing that comes to mind really quickly is course to find. You start out with something that's really not well defined, and each level of coming to a solution, you kind of get narrower and narrower till you have, almost like a very limited, a very, very well-defined problem. And maybe that's a really important piece. A lot of times solving a problem, you really didn't spend a lot of time actually thinking to yourself, what really is the problem here, right? I want to hang this cabinet. And all of a sudden we kind of jump to the complexity. Oh, I've got to buy the cabinet. I've got to go to Home Depot. I've got to get the hardware. And maybe in your mind's eye, there's all this stuff that clouds the fact that maybe you are going to need help or maybe you don't have the right tools. So it's, and forgive me, maybe this is like really, really basic, but it's sort of mentally getting a picture and going through, start out with all this stuff and then prioritizing as you go, what's really, really important to this problem. And along the way, really questioning, is this what I really need? Is this what I really want to achieve? Am I emotionally connected to this? A lot of times socializing the idea, getting ideas from others. But a big part of engineering is requirements, right? What does this thing really have to do? I was doing some robotics work for a potential client, and they wanted to design this robot to climb up stairs. And, they didn't have a lot of talented engineering on their staff. And it's almost like the difficulty of climbing upstairs with these sort of soft robotics. Everyone just thought that you just kind of like go on the web and it's like an app, you download the solution and like, there it is, right? And so now I started to ask questions like, well, what typical, what kind of stairway are we going to climb? Is it, a stairway to the subway? What's the friction coefficients? What's the variability in the measurements? How fast do you want to climb the stairs? Do you want to take all day? Do you want to take 30 seconds? Oh, are you going to, there were some military aspects to this. Oh, so you want to carry some heavy hardware and you want to carry up the stairs. And how long do you want this to operate? And how are the guys going to carry the batteries, right? So, and so before you know it, you've got this fishbone, and it could be on a piece of toilet paper, it could be whatever, but all of a sudden you have this diagram of like all these questions that you need to answer. And John, I'm going to segue to you in just a few seconds because I think it'll be healthy that way. But so there's this initial dialogue between what of really taking a fine tooth comb and looking at what needs to be done, and then saying, okay, so one or two of these things really gate the success of the design of this, let's say, robotic device. We've narrowed it down to a stairway that could, looks roughly, has these dimensions. It's made out of these materials. It may be really dusty. It may have rocks on it. It may be slippery. And I've got to climb this thing in 30 seconds. Oh, okay. And the thing's going to weighs 15 pounds. And all of a sudden that starts setting up motor sizes and gear sizes and stiffness of members, right, in an engineer's mind. And before you know it, you start, like sort of this hand-eye thing. You start sketching things out, and you start doing what we call back of the envelope calculations, right? If I'm a 260-pound guy and I'm hitting somebody at 25 miles an hour, and I'm going to be wearing a helmet, and I don't want it to snap my neck, that means that I've got about 2 inches of travel for that foam to absorb maybe 30% of the energy that I'm hitting this poor fellow with, right? So, that's so John, let me segue to you a little bit. Maybe you can fill in the parts that I missed.
I think the point you're trying to make here, right, is to really work, I think, initially on defining what the problem is to be solved, right? And you touched on a fishbone diagram is basically nothing more than just kind of brainstorming out as much of the minutia, at least up front, that you can think about that might be important to enacting the design that you're looking to generate, right? So there's always going to be some things that are left off. There's always going to be other things that you realize might become important as you are going through the process. But it's always good to put a stake in the sand to have an initial, right, like an initial idea of everything that you think is going to be important, right? And so John makes a good point of, evaluating a lot of those things, because some of them are going to be like, oh, it could be green or it could be yellow. That doesn't matter really. In the end is really where that matters, right? What really matters is at the onset, right? Does your device need you to generate as much power as a city uses in a day? And then you're like, well, that's a limiting factor. That's something that maybe I'm not going to be able to, that's a hurdle that I'm not going to be able to jump. So I think, if I can sum it up, right, it's like the importance of defining what it is that you're looking to do, as I think of utmost importance at the beginning of the design.
And thank you, John. And the other thing that I think will resonate with everyone on this call is also, and this comes with practice, is at some point, believe it or not, we're going to say, you also don't want to overthink it, right? Like at some point, I think, John, that's what you meant when you said putting a stake in the sand. You also kind of want to move forward, because sometimes it's helpful to just pick up a piece of metal and start machining something with the idea that this is going to inform how you then proceed, and maybe make some of the things that you're spending a lot of time thinking about actually go away, right? You may be thinking about, do I have the right tools? Do I have the right this, that, or the other thing? And then you start doing it and you realize that, that's really not. So action is also a part of this. And I think that that should also resonate. I think I might, Casey, if you think it's appropriate, jump to some of the slides that.
Yeah, so John, I was going to say kind of the thing that as you know, I'm not an engineering mind. Some of the words that you've said, I'm writing down to look up later. All right. So fishbone, that concept of developing the skeletal foundation of how do we build the muscle and the ligaments and the thing on top so we can create a fish to swim up the river. I think, you know, almost everybody on this call, excluding the civilians, and I'm one of them, has experienced combat. And in war, you don't just march into a country. You have to have a plan. And so,
Yes.
but in order to have a plan, we have to identify what is the problem, who is the target, what are we trying to achieve in this objective. Now, to leave politics out of that conversation, we look at surrounding the problem with questions. And you know, a couple of years ago, I was working with a guy, and we talked about a problem his business was having. It was some sort of a marketing / accounting problem. And what we did was we wrote the problem down as we saw it from one angle. We physically moved ourselves to another side of the table and got into a different mindset, took a break, got into a different mindset, and evaluated the problem from a different physical standpoint and a mental standpoint. And then we saw some different outliers. And what we did, and what you guys are talking about, I think, is developing the foundation from which you can build the solution on. Without understanding fully the problem, the vision that I got was, you know, if I walked into somebody's house who was a hoarder and my objective to solve their problem was to get them organized, if I just went at it and got in there with organized boxes, I might box myself in. But if I had a strategic plan and understood the problem, and there's food over here and there's clothes over, I can attack the problem. And I think it's no different than, and I'm gonna kind of call out the people on this call, not that they need to speak, but just some of the things that they're trying to attack. As an example, we have an individual who is looking at inventing a blanket to solve a specific problem. This individual doesn't have a patent, doesn't have anything written out. Is it just at the idea stage of, I've identified a problem because of something I've experienced. How can I solve this problem? Well, we have this vision of the product, right? But how do we get to that point? And I think that's a great transition into some of the slides, Mr. John, that you had for us. So I'll segue and pass it back to you with that. But I think that's a good way to identify what we've just been talking about. It's the surrounding of a problem. Don't just attack with what you think is a solution, i.e. the shotgun method of marketing. Let's go at it with a sniper rifle, but let's identify all the elements in which could impact the end result.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
really,
you know,
yeah,
go ahead.
It sounds, you know, it's really, you know, sometimes we need to be reminded. I find I need to very often be reminded of the very basic things, right? Oh, wow. You know, this is not, you know, you might, myself included, say, hey, you know, this is like really basic stuff. You know, you're going fishing, make sure you've got your tackle box, your best lures, you know, your fishing rod, the rod's oiled, and, you know, like, because I want to catch fish, you know, and, you know, bring some Band-Aids in case I hook my finger, and, you know, I don't know, bring some lunch. So like, in some sense but then when you start like writing all this stuff down, you begin to sort of frame the complexity. And then what are the big thing is I have to get permission maybe from the missus. Oh, only if it makes sense, and you can cut me off. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and only if this adds to the conversation.
Yeah, let's do it. I think, team, just so you know, John kind of walked us through this quickly, but I think this would be a good way for you to visualize what he's kind of talking about. And John, is this the product that you created for the hospital? Is this the slides that you had for that, or is this something different?
Yeah, I'm just give me 1 second. I'm trying to, yeah. So this is, I designed a device for Sloan Kettering Hospital, working with doctors. They needed a special tool for cervix, for cancer of the cervix, and maybe without getting into too much detail, because it's sort of gruesome stuff. So they needed this tool, and they came to me. I was recommended by the local chapter of the, you know, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, and so this was sort of some of the presentation stuff I gave to them. You know, phase one was the foundation, sort of, you know, hey, so from mid-January to March, I'm going to do some preliminary analysis. I'm going to do some modeling. I'm going to do some requirements. Then phase two is I'm gonna figure out how it's really gonna work. I'm gonna do some concepts and some design sketches. And then I'm gonna start building this tool, and I'm gonna start fabricating. So this is, let me just see if I can kind of walk through. Remember I mentioned this whole course to find, sort of strategies, concepts, modules. Let me ask, is this clear to everyone in the sense that the video is coming through?
It is coming through. It is coming through. Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. So strategies, concepts, modules, components. This is really kind of geared really more towards really mechanical stuff. The other thing that John and I bring is we have this passion for what's called user-centered design. And what that means is that you really don't have anything that really works until it's in the hands of the person that's going to use it, and they've had time to actually play around with it and give feedback. And that feedback is really, really critical to whether or not you have something that somebody's going to really want, right? So until you've put something in the hands of, or delivered something that they can start to use, you almost don't know whether or not you have something that's successful or not. Does that resonate with folks?
Absolutely. I was actually going to say it triggered something for me in the second slide or so, that there's this design and conceptual writing down, and in your head, okay, I'm on the computer, I'm on the piece of paper, this works, but it may not. But you have to try. You have to try and fail, or try and learn, and try and succeed. And it's okay to get to that point. But in order to do that, I think it is, go to the client. Is this the path that we're on? Is this where we're supposed to go? Or go to Mr. Fortunato and go, what am I missing? What's the gap here? But I like the way you've broken that down.
But it's very easy sometimes to get so wrapped up in your own way that you're visualizing the design and what's happening, that you always have to have that feedback back from the actual customer or the actual audience, right? Because what you might think is the best thing since sliced bread, the audience might not have that same thought, and it's better for you to understand that early on than late.
Yeah, and very good points. The thing, so I'm sort of, we'll do this, people like, sort of animations, so one of the aspects of this was to take an existing tool, because they liked how this tool worked, and pair it to this additional functionality. So one of the things I had to do in this design effort was to take this existing medical device and capture some of the characteristics of it that they really liked. And one of the things they liked it about was how flexible it was, and how inflexible this other incarnation of the tool was. And this is just an example of some of the modeling that goes on. Reporting of stiffness. There's some experimentation to get an idea of what it means when someone says, hey, I grabbed this tool and I load it. This is me doing some, measurements of sort of deflection. And then, again, just showing some interesting pictures. Let me jump to some fixturing to do some testing. And let me, I had to, the cervix environment here, I had to create, sort of model the cervix environment where this tool was to be used, and some of the geometry there. Here's an example of some of the detailed drawings that then had to be created. Let me jump to, this is, let me quickly jump to,
You're doing a good job, John. You have a good eye for the things that are interesting.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the stuff is not that interesting, right? It's highly technical, and it's just the things that have to be done to get you to where you need to go. Not everything is going to be a nice colored animation, right?
Yeah. So this is just an animation of some of the functionality that the tool needed to have in order to do what the doctors wanted it to do. Here's an example of just while I'm designing with the customer, with the doctors, right? I'm sketching out concepts, and this is, nothing really fancy, but sort of getting an idea of how some of this stuff, you get comments from the users of, hands are small, it's got to go together easily. It's a very intense environment in the operating room. And this thing has to go together basically with someone who's basically blinded, because of the intensity of during an operation. They need this tool to be fitted and put together, and the skills of the existing folks that are putting stuff together. And sometimes it's just sketching out concepts, and let me see, and then maybe some of this is, so this might be interesting to show in the sense that, so various concepts are then, you talk about the advantages and the disadvantages, and you do this with the people that you're working with. I won't get into the particulars of the split brick combined concept number one, split brick combined, but it has certain advantages to the audience and it had certain disadvantages. And in the end, you kind of go with one that works. This is an example of, then you do some final computerized, stressing it to see it like in its final incarnation. Is it going to work? Is it going to fail? Is it going to be able to withstand the loads? And then ultimately, I wonder if I'll just jump to.
That's very important for safety of something, especially if you don't have a customer and you're just thinking of bringing something to market, right? The value in the analysis, right, is like you want to be sure that it's going to be safe for the end user to use it, right?
So this is not quite 100% finished, but the doctors at Sloan Kettering were really anxious to see how it was coming along. And anyway, that was a quick run through. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and just one example. If it was the design of a transmission housing for Sikorsky helicopter, the process probably wasn't much different. It was really kind of similar.
Now, you had mentioned kind of the safety of using the product that you're inventing, and obviously what you were just talking about is highly critical. And so for somebody that's inventing something that's not, from a safety perspective on that level, it's kind of I'm asking the question because I partly know the answer, but I'm not really sure how to phrase it other than saying, are there companies out there that you can take a product or a prototype that you have come up with and let them use it in the environment in which it would be used and test the safety, and maybe again see the problem from a completely different forest and a different angle to give you feedback and development?
So that's a really, so if I got everything that you asked, I think the thing you were asking is, are there resources out there to help people get the kind of feedback that I was talking about? And yes, there are. And there's many different paths to that, primary of which tend to be people that you trust. There's a lot of vultures out there when it comes to, you think you have a novel idea, and it's kind of, I've been a part of it too. So one of the things that I don't necessarily like to gravitate to negativity, but I'll go here for just a minute, and just say that if you have a really novel concept, in some sense, keep it to yourself or only those people that you really trust. And as benevolent as sometimes you kind of think that, oh, all folks must be like me, and I can share that. They're really not. And one of the things about getting a patent, let's say, is that one of the questions they ask is, they ask each and every person that you've disclosed this concept to. And if you've disclosed it to too many folks, well, then it's potentially, not necessarily, but potentially not novel anymore. All right, so let me come back to the original question. So there are, so usually, like if in my case and John's case, we're working with clients and we're working on something that they need. So usually they roll out the red carpet and give us their best folks. They give us their best environment, right? And if we show up with, hey, we've got this prototype and we want to hang it on one of your machines and see if it works, they pull out all the stops. And I guess that's an ideal environment, right? Sometimes you'll get clients, though, that are looking to see if what they have is really special. So John and I have been hired in some cases they want to know if we can invent what they have and whether or not, they want to gauge how special what they have. And in those situations, they're really not all that apt to let us see their environment, what they're doing. They just want to see if we could actually come up with something similar so that they can gauge, yeah, we really have something, that's sort of an esoteric case, but I wanted to kind of give two extremes. Now there are, I'm not, there are, and John, maybe you know more about this. You have a little bit more experience on the commercial end with all the tooling stuff that you were working on. But there are, I know it, like in the aerospace industry, there are companies that certify newly developed components so that they're of sufficient quality to exist on airframes. The name escapes me, but there's a big one out in Long Island.
Dayton?
And there's so I wouldn't be able to rattle off a bunch of names, but there are organizations that can help test your product. And in many cases, depending on how your product's being used, there are federal requirements, sort of like UL and other child safety organizations that require you to be tested, or sometimes they're just prudent measures to make your product more saleable.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about a couple of things that I think our veterans can be and have expressed concern in. One is viability of the product. Yes, in their mind, in our minds, it works, but we have to test it, and in order to do so, we have to be very careful about who we share that information with.
Yes,
our organization and what we do as advisors, I can tell you that most of us are not going to be able to duplicate. So it's safe. It's safe for us to understand and help walk through and advise. In fact, that's our job. We could probably get in a lot of trouble if we don't, or if we share that information. But the viability of a product has to exist outside of our head, out of our spirit, outside of our room in which we operate. And then, but we have to be careful with that. So there's a question that's come up a couple times in the chat that I want to address, but you also brought up patents, which I want to make sure we talk about patent pending process before we're done here. But the question that was asked a couple times is, what kind of CAD software do y'all use? And that CAD software might be very, very advanced or different or highly expensive, vice something that a new inventor, a new innovative type person might be able to use. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you use, what you might recommend for a rookie in this game?
John, you want to comment on? So there are relatively inexpensive to even free options, right? So John, you've what is that one CAD? I know that there's on the analysis side, right? There are a few open source packages which are free for the end user to use. It might be interesting to evaluate. We'd have to evaluate whether or not that extends to commercial entities, right? But prior to commercial entity, I believe that there are open source packages for analysis. John, what's that one online CAD?
Yeah,
for-
I use it all the time, and the name escapes me. I don't know how on earth I'm.
But it was a couple of the guys. I think the guy that came up with that was manufacturing SolidWorks, which is a second tier CAD design package. He came up with like an online OnCAD, I believe is the name of it, right?
Onshape,
right?
Onshape.
OnShape, right?
That's it.
And so they have now like a free version that maybe limits you to I'm noticing in the chat that SolidWorks has a veteran deal for $20, and I'm forgetting my audience. It's very possible that some of these tier 2 and tier 3, which are very advanced packages, may very well have some sort of military discount that all of a sudden makes them a much more viable option than to try to work with some free or very low cost. I wouldn't say that it's hindered, but I would say that it's not as full featured package. Somebody's mentioning Fusion 360 also. There is a right that I'm aware of the fact that if you can use it commercially up until you have more than some amount of sales, which I believe the whoever just typed in the chat, it's once you start to break that $100,000 mark, then you have to renegotiate your licensing with them. But there are a lot of options to get started that are little to no cost, maybe a monthly. John, you know what the cost is.
Yeah, so I think depending on where you are and the kind of sophistication that you need to do, some of these very basic CAD software packages are really great, especially if you need to learn. Yes, John and I have used all kinds of CAD software systems, from CATIA to NX to Pro-E, and done all kinds of complex surfacing, and everybody ends up have a favorite. We were, for a very long time, John and I were big fans of Inventor. You could do marvelous things with that CAD software package.
Autodesk product. Right?
Autodesk products. I happen to be at the moment a big fan of Onshape. They have a free public, like, I guess you have to allow that the stuff you design, if you want to own your stuff, they've got like some introductory costs per month. It's on the cloud. You don't have to worry about storing, they save all your latest files. It's not for everybody, but
it's in the browser. It's in the browser,
yeah.
Correct, right? Yeah.
I'm not current on maybe what some of the latest offerings are, but find one that doesn't cost too much, that has parametric capability and extrusions and Boolean operations where you could subtract solids from solids and make ornate shapes and fillet stuff and tapers, and you need to be able to make drawings, dimensioning. It has to have all that basic stuff. And as you get more and more sophisticated, you'll learn about geometric tolerancing. If you want to hold tight tolerances and you want things to fit the first time. But it's an enormous space out there with a lot of really powerful offerings. And, I can, on this call, or even, subsequently a later time, John and I can demo sort of what we use and why we use it. Many paths to the sea in that regard.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for addressing that stuff. I know that's kind of the beginning stage. People want to draw and maybe they can't draw that well. and they want some sort of CAD program, but you also got to understand how to use the program.
Yeah. And there's tons of, the great thing about the internet now, right, is that everything's on YouTube. Oh, I want to learn how to use this CAD package. You just put in the CAD package name. Oh, and I want to like make something that looks like this, and it's on there. You just got to like spend the time watching the videos, and it's truly amazing. All you need is passion for what you want to do, and a little bit of method, right, and patience, and you can get there. You don't have to. It used to be that you had to be tied to a place in order to get access to knowledge, right? But now, as we know, especially with COVID, right now that connection is being broken, right? I don't have to be physically somewhere, although there obviously are cases where you need to be physically located. But in many cases now, knowledge is immediately available to me. And so when it comes to selecting a CAD package is, do some research and then start experimenting. The other thing, Carrie, if you don't mind, hopefully I'm not taking too much, talking too much, because I'll just keep going. But the other piece is there are analysis packages, and John can speak to this in greater depth than I can, but there are, designing something that may look kinematically it works in the sense that in a geometrical sense, parts fit and it looks like it's going to work. There are now emerging, or they've already emerged, analysis softwares that are very easy to use, where you can optimize your design and look at stresses and strains and say, you know what, this thing is made out of some foam and it's bending too much, and I really need to increase the diameter a bit. So they're not quite yet at the stage where they replace engineers. Thank God, I still have some longevity in my career, but they're getting pretty darn good. And one of the ones I use, which may not be the easiest one, is SimScale. And those interested, eyeball that. They've got a free version and it's really simple to use. And I used it with MIT recently to do pretty much all the stress analysis on a ventilator that was being designed for the masses during this COVID thing. And I used it quite effectively. In fact, at some other point, I could show some slides of what I'm talking about in terms of understanding whether a part's going to hold up in the environment that you intend. And again, my point is that some of this software is becoming like so incredibly, compared to what it was, right? I mean, in 1909, to run an automobile, you basically had to be a mechanic, right? Things were always, they needed oil I have a 1929 Indian motorcycle, inline four. I've got a 1931 Model A Ford that I drive as almost my everyday car that John can attest to. Yeah. Now those were a bit more evolved by the time of the 30s, but I'm going to eventually get to my point. But in like the early teens and, the Model T and before then, you really needed, a car couldn't be operated by just anybody. In fact, you had to be pretty mechanically savvy. So only a few years ago, in order to do any kind of analysis on a product idea, you really needed to be like one of these white coats, PhD guys, these MIT guys would, but now they've gotten these human interfaces to the point where you import the geometry, you kind of tell them, I'm going to load this thing with approximately, I don't know, I think it's 5 pounds. You tell me what it should be. And all of a sudden they'll give you diagrammatically like where this thing is likely to fail. And, you might have to read up on what stresses are and what strains are. And, you'll begin to notice that when things connect like this, that point where my fingers are touching is called a singularity, and the stresses go to infinity. And so you might want to add a fillet there because it's likely to crack there. So anyway, that I'll
You know, in short, right, like you want to make something out of steel, and right, and you know that you're going to want to you're going to want to put a certain amount of force on it, and the analysis software in a very small nutshell is like, oh, okay, it tells you that if you've got your part and it's made out of steel and you push on it like this, it tells you what the stresses are, and then you know what the maximum amount of stress that a piece of steel can handle, right? And so the output that you get from this analysis, you compare to that, and you say, oh, it's that my stresses are going to be 3 times more than this steel can handle. Now you know that you have a problem. So you either have to change the design, or you have to change your mentality of how it's going to be used, and you can only put 1/3 as much force on it, right? Or you have to use a different design or a different material, and you have to start thinking about different titanium or some other stronger material, right? And so it gives you that closed loop feedback of, this is my thing, this is what I want to make it out of, and this is what the strength has to be because of the use case. And it allows you to iteratively evaluate that and evaluate the changes that you make to see if you can, if you have something that's a viable end product.
No, that's great. This is, you know, it's amazing how these conversations go. We've gone down into these weeds of developing and manipulating and applicability, et cetera. And that's, I mean, it's incredibly valuable. There's 2 things I want to make sure we touch on. Is I'm double checking the time. We only have about 30 minutes left, and I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time for questions. One being how to pursue a patent, when and how, and what should we be thinking about as inventors as we take those steps.
Okay. Yeah, so patents is an enormous,
Tricky subject, yeah.
is enormous field, and it's not as chiseled as some of the physics that John and I do on a daily basis. In the sense that you know, a lot of the stuff that you're working on is subjective as opposed to objective. I did write down some notes. Now, despite, I think John and I, between us, you know, we've got a fair number of patents. Let me say that out the gate, I can be sort of, I've spent a lot of time with talented patent folks. I went to school with fellas that became lawyers. They studied engineering, they became lawyers, and they became patent attorneys. And they're fantastic guys, and they're straight shooters. And I go to them all the time when I have questions. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Is I was fortunate enough to be exposed and have friendships with some pretty talented patent folks. Not everybody has that luxury. In the past, I've been able to sort of steer folks to folks that are known to be decent folks, and you're going to steer you in the right direction locally. And that's been, I've had a fair number of calls in the past. Hey, John, I hear you. And I've been able to steer folks to the right resources. And I think that was a high value thing. And I'd be willing to try to do that for anybody that has questions along those lines. The other thing that I wrote down this morning, it's kind of funny, but if you really think your idea is the best thing since sliced bread, then you should be willing to put the time in to like get on the US Patent Office website and spend some time reading all the stuff that they have on that website, because they go through a lot there, and ultimately leading to like understanding in your space what patents are out there, and specifically what claims are being made, and trying to tie so claims, that subject is a pretty important, part of the patenting process ultimately is when I'm saying that something is novel, you're going to make claims to why it's novel. And if your claims infringe on earlier claims, right, then you may have difficulty getting a patent. And so the first, I had a young lady recently who, had thought her, idea was really, really special. And I think she was very thankful that I steered her to a group of folks that were looking to help her, professional folks, but also that she should familiarize herself with the patent office and the tools they have there, and get familiar reading how other people wrote about their own ideas is really an important, invest that time so that you can begin to think about how you're going to write about your own idea. John, does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And, from personal experience, right, I can say that I'm always, I can't exactly speak for John M., but I know that he similarly probably has ideas and he thinks, oh, that might be something that's patentable. And I've come up with many an idea that I just did a very cursory search online or through a patent search and found an idea very similar to the idea that I had, but I wasn't familiar with it, right? But just because you're not familiar with it doesn't mean that somebody else didn't already come up with an idea that's similar enough to your idea that your idea is no longer patentable, right? And you don't need to have a patent to make something and sell it.
Yes, very important piece.
Right? You don't need to have a patent to make something and sell it. You need to have a patent to attempt to make something and keep other people from selling the same thing, but that's not a no-brainer and that's not a guarantee. Just because you have a patent doesn't mean that somebody else can't make your product and sell it. It just makes it more of a better opportunity that you have to maybe stop them, maybe.
And a lot of times they have bigger pockets than you. So even if you have the patent.
The patent process can be expensive, can be
No.
very expensive and time consuming. And because unless you're a lawyer, you're going to need a lawyer.
Yeah.
Or
We don't
a
need
service, right? Because I don't know, Casey, maybe there's a military law service that provides patent lawyers as to military folks. I'm not familiar with that, right? But for a lay person, right, there's going to be quite a bit of an expense involved for patent law.
And so let me just build on a couple of points that John made. We're not saying here that going for a patent is not we're not saying that it's a bad idea. We're just sort of alerting you to some of the stuff on the periphery. And a lot of people gravitate to the patents, but getting a patent can be a very worthwhile, getting the patent itself. And then you go to, I have a close friend that a few years ago invented this really small type of transmission. And he went to this, local bicycle company in Connecticut with this idea, and he had the patent. And because he had the patent, right, the company had to belly up to the bar and they wanted this idea, and he had the patent, right? So he did pretty well for himself because he had the patent. So there's good stories, and then there's not so good stories. Getting familiar with doing a patent search, putting the time in. If you really think your idea is worth something, then what's the slogan? Put your money where your mouth is, or whatever. But do the work, upfront work. The other thing that was very useful is that every community, believe it or not, maybe not every community, but I think most fairly large communities have like these local inventors clubs. And they have these biannual. The one in Connecticut here is monthly. And it's an incredible resource. And I wrote this down this morning. I've had some success with people come to me with ideas, and I pointed them to like this inventors club, and I said, hang out there for a while and let the let the sheep surface, let the wolves surface, and then the sheepdogs,
absorb
right?
everything, absorb everything.
You know, like get an eye for it, and before you know it, you'll hey, there's this guy in the corner of the room where everybody listens to, and he's a friendly, and he's like the most knowledgeable, and then you can really find, you know, an ace. And that has been very fruitful. Here in Westchester County, there's this inventors club, and there's some pretty decent folks. There's very few wolves, very few. There's some, right? Because, you know, it's a great opportunity. Some people can say, you know, oh yeah, we're gonna help, we're gonna do everything for you. You know, give us $5,000. We'll take you to the top of the hill. And all they did was steal your idea. You know what I mean? Or make it so that you can't get a patent because now they know about it and they've put it on the internet or whatever they've done with it. And I've seen that a fair number of times. But these local inventors clubs are really good for, you know, spend some time. And I think now all the meetings are held Zoom wise. So you might even be able to tap into like a national one, but you got to spend some time and weed out the folks that are really not going to do much for you. And then the folks that could possibly do some harm. And then there's the folks that are really kind of there's that movie. There's three kinds of people. There's sheep, wolves, and, you know, sheepdogs, you know, and I use that all the time, even with my kids, you know, like you got to find the sheepdog. And that's what,
Well, John,
right.
I was gonna mention you've brought up a couple things that we had talked about earlier this week, and one that we hadn't. But there's a lot of resources to get patents. It's a huge subject. We could spend hours and days, and there's classes on patent. So I think what's important, what I took from that was you got to do your homework. You got to do a little research. And the other thing that John F. said that I thought was impactful, you don't need a patent to sell a product. Now, if you create a product that infringes on someone else's patent, just be prepared for whatever that means. So there's a lot to that. But one of the things that you mentioned that's worth repeating is you can have a passion for something. You can have an idea inside your head and it makes a lot of sense. But without the work, without the energy, without the persistence and the I'm not going to quit attitude, nothing's going to happen. And I think we have a lot of veterans on the call that are kind of at that stage. What do I do? How do I go? The third thing that I wanted to bring up, the third thing I want to bring up is there is a unique relationship between an engineer and an inventor and an attorney. And sometimes it's good, but a lot of times it's not. And you got to find people that you trust, and doing your homework and the patent research and the claims is all, I hope that y'all are taking notes on that, because it's not just, I have an idea, I'm going to get it to market. It's not Shark Tank. There is so much behind the scenes that we don't see from these two individuals, from the Tony Starks of the world, that are creating things that we use every day that took so many thousands of hours to get to that point. And if you're willing to do that, you can find success, and you may even find it in an area that you didn't think you were set out to pursue. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing that, because I'm a business-minded person, when I hear you talking about these ideas and these concepts, there's a great book called The Entrepreneur Myth. It's a very easy book to read, and it talks about the 3 roles in any small business that individuals have to play. And there's the technician, the person that's doing the thing, creating the product, plumbing the house, etc. There's the manager, who's administratively managing the business day to day, keeping it afloat, paying the bills, receiving the money. And then there's the entrepreneur. As engineers, you're thinking from strictly the engineer standpoint, and then you're going to the technician and back and forth. And it is a difficult balance without people you can trust and partner with and talk to, which brings us to, I think, our last topic. The reason why, we're sitting here talking to you is because you expressed an interest in helping veterans. The initial concept of that was to bring 1, maybe 2 down the road, veterans to a kind of apprentice or intern under you, learn some things, use your shop, and just kind of get dirty with the process. Obviously, with COVID and us not having many people in that area, it's a little bit difficult. So what I want to kind of focus the remaining 20 minutes of our conversation on is what kind of things, and I don't mean to say this in a crass way, but let's talk about how you guys can help our veterans, and what kind of resources, even if it's just an informational interview after the call, or maybe it's an ongoing once a week type of thing. And then I want to leave the last 10 minutes for anybody that's got a question to talk about a project they're on, and has a specific question on that. So first, let's address, how we can move forward in working with you with our veterans.
So if you'll permit me to say one thing about myself, I'm a long-term, John will probably attest to this, like I'm kind of like I'm a long-term guy. Nothing I do is short. I mean, other than running to the grocery store for the missus and the kids or whatever, but like most of the stuff, I'm a long-term guy, and so I'm looking for long-term success. And so like, what do I mean by that in the context of Semper Fi is, I think, start off small, start off with, high value interactions. You have a particular need. Let's get an email exchange going. I'll give you my cell phone number. You folks seem like pretty, we haven't started chatting yet, but, I'll assume you're like pretty logical. John and I, we have families and family obligations and intense work environment. So if all of a sudden I get like 1,000 calls in one night, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I'm gonna, but on the other hand, I could get like a couple of emails saying, hey, I'm working on this project. What do you think? And like, so that we schedule some time, we fit it into the schedule. And then, I can begin to tailor my own work schedule to help maybe accommodate more, find out really what the time commitment is. Maybe as a group, we get into, Colonel Meyer mentioned, maybe there's down the ways a bit, there's this like concept that, as a group, maybe people rally behind, and, maybe John and I end up doing some of the engineering for that, so at this point, and typically at the beginning, right, the sky's the limit, but I do, so I've got this long-term view, which means that over time, we're going to get better and better at interacting. There may be some bumps in the road. Maybe I won't respond as quickly as you would have liked to that email. Be patient with me. My heart's in this. A few months down the road, we'll step outside and we'll look at what we've been able to do and say, is this working? Is this something worthwhile?
How it organically just starts to blossom, right? I mean, that's all we can really go, right? Like you said, John, myself, right? I have some time to devote, and I will eventually answer every question or email or call that is left. Just what that time frame is will just totally be based on the extent of involvement from you guys, right? And how many people have questions, and how many people are sending emails and things like that. So I think it's best to eventually, we'll probably have another one of these calls, and we'll be saying how great it's working out, right?
And thanks, John. That was, thank you for the other point is, we're going to learn just as much from working with you folks, right? It's always a two-way street. I bring to the table my bag of tricks, but everybody else brings their own. And I'm sure, as Colonel Meyer and Casey have mentioned, there's a lot of talent in this group, I understand. And some of you folks might be more talented in certain areas than I am in terms of machinist. I'm not a professional machinist, I'm a professional engineer. I claim to know some machining, but maybe some of you folks have some pretty sophisticated capability. Maybe I'll hire you for my next fabrication job, So
no, this is good. I mean, I think one of the things that I know will come out of this is we'll have a lot of questions. Sometimes it's hard to ask a question on a call like this because it is highly specific, and we don't want to share too much information over this platform, which is understandable. So if you will permit in this forum for me to ask each of you if it would be okay if a veteran reached out to me or another advisor, if they would ask to be connected to one of you, would you be okay with that email introduction?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we'll do then moving forward is, this is for all of our veterans. If there is questions and you'd like to connect with, network with, potentially partner with a project, or if you are interested in some sort of internship, apprenticeship with either of the Johns, please reach out to us, not just me. If it happens to be me, that's fine, but your advisor or John Mayer as well. Let us know. These things are set up for resources for you. We didn't end up finding the Johns, they found us, and what a gift this has been to be able to talk to them and pick their brain. And you see that they operate on a different level than we do, most of us anyway, me for sure. But they're still human beings. They love the interaction. They want to be able to help and give back, which is something we find common ground in. So don't be shy about pursuing them and finding a way forward in your career, in your path, your invention, your business idea. They want to help. We want to help as well. We want to be able to facilitate. This is just a part of the repertoire that we have, the tool belt that we have, is access to folks like this. So what I want to do now is, I know that some people had some questions. If you don't have them, if you're too shy, you don't want to talk anymore, no problem. We can kind of close with some thoughts, but please type them in, say, hey, I want to talk, whatever, in the next couple minutes. And as that's going on, Johns, I want to open up the floor to you to just say any advice that you have for our young inventors, our people that want to be like you, who want to patent something, who want to be a part of this marketplace. What kind of advice do you have?
John, you can start.
So I maybe I missed something. You were going to open up the audience to questions, or do you want me to say something?
Yeah, so usually they'll type something in, say, hey, I want to talk, or they'll raise their hand.
Oh, okay.
So we'll just wait on that. But as we go, just, share any advice you might have.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind as Casey was talking, that was really important, is sometimes it's really not. What happens is, and I mentioned this on an earlier call with Casey and Colonel Meyer. Sometimes what ends up, you find out about a project that you have in mind, is that it ends up being about the path and less about, your passion comes from this idea, this goal. But the other thing I might say is, it's been my experience too, that when I look back, it was the path that really was ultimately meaningful to me. And it didn't work out, or didn't quite get finished the way that I thought, but really through some mystical way, it was really about the path that brought me together with folks in ways that I would never have been brought together. And that's
the value in the process, right?
Yeah, just like sometimes it's really, you end up finding out you need to have that end goal to get you in some kind of process, but you end up reflecting on it, and there's a lot of value there. And so I think John and I also hope to be part of not just the end game, but also the process itself.
Yeah, the experience of the process itself can sometimes be valuable, because right, Casey, you mentioned Shark Tank, right? And I'm sure that if anybody's seen Shark Tank, there are plenty of times where somebody has a lot of passion and somebody has an idea, and they just tell them, like, this is great, but this is a hobby, right? There isn't maybe the market for this that you think that there is, right? So you always have to be, right? So if you're designing something for someone, the market exists, right? Because you have a customer, right? But if you have an idea for something, right, and for you, it might be like a game changer for, I can get through my day because of this, right? But maybe that's valid for 10 other people in the world, or 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000. It's with experience is the only way that you can get that feedback and understand whether or not there's a product that can actually be a business or just a hobby.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, I mean, we talk about all the time. Try, just try, because there's not really a failure in that. There's, the I learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb thing. I only needed one to learn how to
Right.
do it. So I want to unmute one of our guys here, Jonathan, another John, of course. He has a question, so I want to unmute him. I'm asking him to unmute, and he's going to take the mic.
Hey, thanks, Casey. I'm John Cunningham. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I'm a retired Marine, and I was also in grad school for engineering when I got deployed. So for more than 15 years, I've been trying to solve problems related to prosthetic arms, which are basically an orphan medical device because, as you say, there's no market. There are only like 50,000 people in the United States who need a prosthetic arm, and reimbursements are low and all that. But like you say, I've been working on it because it's a problem that's meaningful to me. So I won't take up too much time, but I posted a couple links. We have a nonprofit called Open Prosthetics where we were hoping that people would share ideas, and for the most part, that hasn't happened. It sort of became a forum for users to interact. And since we've redone the website, not much has actually happened there at all. And I have a for-profit called Stumpworks. I've developed this soft prosthetic arm that's made like a athletic shoe. So it allows nearly full anatomical range of motion, and we're still working on getting that out there. But anyway, there are a bunch of projects that I would like to introduce to the group at some point, including making an improved version of this hook that was patented in 1912 that hasn't been improved since the 50s. And there's a mechanical hand that was patented in 1935 that's the best mechanical hand that I've ever used, that could use some updating. And
Wow.
I'd be interested in connecting. If I don't know if there are any lower limb amputees on the call. I want to make a below knee version of this thing. Anyway, I won't take up any more time, but thank you all very much for what you're doing, and look forward to learning more about what everybody else is working on.
Yeah, that's great, Jonathan. So you're sort of embedded in some interesting already creative spaces. You've got a technical background, and it sounds like a discussion offline, with me and John and yourself might be a fruitful one. So there's even though it's a small market, maybe in the US, but globally it's probably a huge market. And what you might find is that there's this concept, they say it came out of the MIT Innovation Lab, but I don't know, it seems too logical to have just exclusively grown out of there. But like there's this thing called lead users, right? And there are these folks that, you ever wonder where Gatorade came from? You ever wonder where like anti-lock braking systems came from? And some of like the LL Bean like shoes, believe it or not, like some of the fishing shoes, I may have that vendor incorrect, but so like anti-lock braking systems came from these like really need acute environments. So airplanes need to stop in really steady minimum distance ways very reliably. And so what you found is that the first anti-lock braking systems occurred in that environment, and then they migrated to other environments where the need was less acute, right? Gatorade, there was this coach who said, I need this energy drink for my football, right? The Florida University Gators. And there was this, they were in proximity to a chemistry department. And so there was this high need, and there was this proximity of knowledgeable folks. And then all of a sudden this drink took off. So my point is that you're a lead user, right? You're at the cutting edge. You're at the cutting edge of innovation. And so you know, it's sort of like a very precious environment that you're in that could be incredibly useful for the masses, you know, and it's this interesting midrash of a mix of folks that could somehow, you know, let that take off. And yeah, so that's, so when I hear you talk, that whole concept of a lead user, and it's actually a very precious environment that you're in. And we can continue to dialogue along those lines.
Yeah, that was great. I definitely think that you two should connect. You three should connect on that. I think we've
Is there
got
anyone else that had a comment?
So I have one that sent me a note. It's a great question because we actually have a lot of woodworkers and leather workers. And the question from this individual said, I'm not an engineer, but I love working on wood and I do leather. I want to design and make a better product. So this is probably on much more of a smaller scale. So how can the Johns help me?
Well, I mean, I guess, you know, you could, that user could get involved in some of the CAD, some of the low cost to free CAD software to be able to make some designs without having to physically manufacture them in wood to maybe get feedback. Right. So that doesn't have to be CAD. That could be in some sort of what's the other software called, John, right? Where it's just a straight up drawing kind of artistic design kind of software, right? But if you have some
Photoshop?
familiarity there, right? You don't have to like spend a week or two to make something in wood to show to somebody and say, can I get some feedback on this design, right? It's a shorter design iteration process, and that's something that we could help guide, right, John?
Yeah. No, I'm yeah, definitely like we're doing sort of maybe on this call, but just at a deeper level, focusing in on some of your ideas and what stage you're at, and sort of like this first order vector that says, hey, you know, go in this direction. We can definitely start up that conversation, sort of like high value moments, right? I often find myself saying, I wish I had a really good teacher or a really good resource right at this moment, because I'm figuring this out myself. And it's taking 5 times the time that it should really take. If I just had this, I know there's somebody out there that knows how to do this. And if we could somehow more often than not be those folks that, you know, where we can.
You know what we discussed, the fishbone, right? The brainstorming. It's always you know, even if you are the most expert in the field, it's always beneficial to explain what it is that you're trying to do to someone else, because just in the explanation, you have to think of how to explain it to someone that isn't as knowledgeable or as steeped in it as you are. And sometimes just that process helps you to look at it in a different way that you maybe haven't looked at it in, because you're just assuming that you have an assumption that is maybe incorrect. And in explaining it to someone at a deeper level, you realize that some of your assumptions or some of your ideas maybe have to be retweaked.
John, that's fantastic. The thought that I got there was somebody identified the toothbrush as being a solution to a problem, but to explain that to someone that they needed it to use it, that maybe never had a problem with their teeth, which I would imagine everybody did at that time. You have to be able to explain it to them, and then they go, oh, well, yeah, but that wouldn't work. So that's a great way to full circle.
Yeah.
And bring us kind of to a close, because what we've talked about is identifying a problem, asking the questions, ask way more questions, open-ended and direct questions about the problem, about the thing that you want to solve, about your idea, and then start to develop it, try it, fail, learn, grow, get around the right people. And when the time is right, finding a patent or not, and finding the right people that will help you distribute the product if you're trying to monetize it, or if you're just trying to solve a problem that won't make you any money, but it is something near and dear to your heart and can make people's lives better. So I want to kind of
Not for profit corporation is always an option also, right? I mean, it's,
I just want to say quickly one thing. Somebody mentioned, I saw it in the chat. So at MIT, they have this innovation lab, and Professor Eric von Hippel, somebody in the chat knows Professor Eric von Hippel. That's a tremendous resource.
yeah.
That whole lead user concept, came, and he's written some really fantastic papers and done some really exciting work with 3M. I know him pretty well. And so if someone in the group has access to that thinking and that capability and that style, it's so then you kind of know exactly where I'm coming from, because I've learned a lot from those folks. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear. Almost very surprising that you know of those folks. So just a credit to the caliber of talent in the group.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are at officially an hour and a half, and that's what we promised you. We delivered, and hopefully everybody got out of this what they came for. And if you did not, and you weren't comfortable asking the question, reach out to me, your advisor, your case manager. We'll get you connected. Gentlemen, Johns, thank you for your patriotism, for your time, and for sharing the gifts that you've been given. That is what this world is all about. That's what we're all trying to pursue, make the world a better place through the things we've been given. So thank you. And we will be in touch. Gentlemen, I'll let you close us out.
John?
All right.
Yeah, no, it was great. Thanks for, thanks for having us. Thank you. Of course, thank all of you for your service. And I just hope that we can be of some help to you guys to move you in the right direction.
Yeah. Thanks for giving us an audience. And there's a long-term goal out there, and we'll take baby steps, and it's been already a very, very pleasant experience and quite surprising. It's a small world, and we'll sort of take it from there.
Yep.
Thank you again. And again, it goes without saying, sometimes some of the most powerful things you mean to say, you don't say because they're so powerful, right? And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for your service.
Amen. Well said. Well said. Gentlemen, thank you. We will be in touch. And guys, have a great day and reach out if you need anything.
Yep. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Take care.